Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Commercial and business indicators have been pointing the way toward an expanding economy for sure now for a while, but just as important, we just feel better about things too. Maybe it's the weather, maybe it's a new season. Thank you for joining us again and welcome to the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy. And as we begin the warmer weather /travel /vacation /summer season, it seems optimism rules the day. We'll check in with our usual panel of experts. And later on, the CEO of the Carolinas and one of the country's busiest airports, Brent Cagle, joins us.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded April 11th, 2014. On this week's program, Laura McKinney of New Carolina, Scott Millar, president of Catawba County Economic Development Corporation, and special guest Brent Cagle, interim aviation director, Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Now, here's Chris William.
Welcome to our program. Happy spring, happy summer. It's, see, people are smiling a little bit easier now. The weather's better, the economy's better. And Laura, let me start with you. Another great announcement out of BMW. It's the gift that keeps on giving to South Carolina. Thank you, Governor Carol Campbell. That BMW has announced more expansion, more jobs. What's the downside to this kind of announcement? Is there?
It's a tremendous announcement. Everyone's very excited. I think the only concern that we may have going forward is again, the kind of pressure on our workforce. But an announcement like this from BMW, I think, is a clear signal of confidence from BMW that we are moving in the right directions on our workforce development issues. Right. And some of the I know you are well familiar with our Transform SC initiative. So looking at the PK through 16 education environment, that we're making great strides. So obviously there's some confidence in the future there.
Yeah, workforce development and the skills gap has been a dialogue that we've had over and over on this program. Scott, we'll bring you into this because Western North Carolina, certainly as many parts of the Carolinas, has been challenged with an old-style workforce in some ways, certainly new in some ways. But how, as Laura talked about workforce development and the confidence that BMW has shown with new and expanding jobs in South Carolina, how do you get that message out that North Carolina is not just open for business, but that this skills gap is something that can be fixed? While it's a real issue, how do you deal with it?
First off, I'd like to point out that what happens in South Carolina is connected to North Carolina. We recently announced a project in Maiden, in my county, that was a supplier for BMW. 228 jobs, $115 million in investment, and they're a BMW supplier. So let's make sure that we realize the impacts of these and the job opportunities. One of the things that we've recognized, certainly our traditional workforce over time, furniture, textiles, of course fiber optics and that sort of thing has been growing, but we're trying to transition that workforce and to encourage that school child when they go past facilities like GKN or others, that there's an opportunity for them, and that's a really difficult issue.
Yeah, and Laura, you just talked about BMW having confidence in the workforce that's organic to South Carolina. But the skills gap is still a real thing.
It is a real thing, but we have all hands on deck in trying to address that. And one of the key issues that we've uncovered really is not so much that we don't have the workforce, it's that they're not even sure what those opportunities are. Like you're saying, when you drive past a large facility, BMW, Michelin, what goes on inside? And it's really getting that message to those school children. And Michelin's actually got programs that go all the way back into the middle schools that are just starting that. This is what advanced manufacturing looks like. This is what your day would look like in our facility, and it is very much not what your parents think about manufacturing or what historically has been associated with manufacturing. These are clean jobs. These are high-skilled jobs. They're working with robotics and computers, and getting that message across that these are high-paying jobs.
You think that's, sorry to interrupt you, Laura, but you think that's, those are parents being uninformed? You think that's the barrier here?
I think what we're finding is not only the parents, but making that connection even to the guidance counselors, that the message is more specific to the child, that doesn't say everybody needs to go to college or everybody doesn't need to go to college, but looking at what the actual opportunities are. And if you start with that, with the end in mind,
Right.
and then work your way backwards. You know, if do you love where you live? Do you want to stay in the upstate? Well, look at what these opportunities are, and actually getting the kids in to see the facilities well before the decision time of where they're going to finish, to be able to get that that vision to say, you know, that looks like a great opportunity, and I'd be glad to be there.
And that challenge is not exclusive to South Carolina, Scott. You're nodding your head. How do you get the kids to look at this job as saying, well, you know, it's not a 4-year degree, maybe it is. But how do you get them to at least understand that there could be a really bright future going that track?
Well, I was with the governor for the last 2 times in the last couple of days in the simulated hospital in Catawba County at CVCC and at the Manufacturing Solutions Center, which
and this is Catawba Valley Community College?
Correct. Yeah. And one of the things that I noticed the most was that there were nonstop tours of children through those facilities. And the STEM tours that are being given, of course, it has to be done over and over and over again, because we've spent a couple of decades or generations of effort to convince people that manufacturing was not cool and it was going somewhere else. And now we've got to turn that tide in North and South Carolina to make that. But the thing is, I don't think we're alone in this problem. I mean, if you talk to the Clevelands and you talk to the Cincinnatis and the other areas of the country, everyone has this workforce issue. We tend to think it's ours alone, but it really is everybody.
Yeah, I'm going to stay with you for just a second here, Scott, for the last few minutes, at least the first part of the program. You're talking about being with the governor in North Carolina, and you have a history, or at least you have some DNA from North Carolina Department of Commerce. What happens if the governor's new plan for commerce is a 501c3 organization? It's a nonprofit, it's a public-private partnership, fairly bold step here to shake up the status quo in North Carolina that's been going on for a while. What happens if the governor does not get the support, the funding from the General Assembly for this new entity? What will commerce look like? What do they have to go back and do?
Well, it does take a step backward. I think that certainly some of the challenges that we have are faced, I mean, in my opinion, and it's difficult sometimes on TV to say that, but my opinion is that commerce is and has been effective in North Carolina for many years. So the new programs that are being talked about are they need to be effective in that recruitment process. And so whether it's public or whether it's private or a mix of both, it really doesn't matter. I'd like to get down to business and let's get this determined one way or another, because we have consultants that would like to have some certainty. That's the question.
Yeah. Challenges for commerce in South Carolina. You know, I say that and I hear it in my head, and it's hard to think that South Carolina commerce has not been hitting on all 8 cylinders. What would the challenges be for commerce right now in South Carolina, do you think, Laura?
In fact, the challenges for commerce right now are
finding
sites.
space.
It's finding sites.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
It is. I mean, on the one hand, you'd say, well, that's a good problem to have, but on the other hand, site development does take time. Secretary Hitt is working very closely across all 46 counties to talk about, what sites are out there, what level of development are they, and really trying to pick those that are closest to development and working with them, because he says with the way manufacturers are right now and with companies, when they show up, they say, I need to be having product out the door in 60 days. So lead time is not very long.
And it's no coincidence, Laura, that Secretary Hitt was also a member at BMW for many years. It seems like there's a certain symmetry in that. Thank you for being stay with us, guys. We're going to bring our guest out in just a second. Next week on this program, he is the chief executive of one of the globe's largest energy companies. They are headquartered or have moved their North American headquarters to Charlotte. His name is Mike Renchek, and he is with Areva, French-based Areva. He will be our guest next week on this program. And then in 2 weeks, the 2014 elections. Can you believe it? I almost hate to say it, but we will be talking about how the 2014 elections here in the Carolinas might impact policy and development and momentum and all other things.
That is slightly disconcerting.
In a recent report, Charlotte Douglas International Airport retained its ranking as the nation's 8th busiest airport in 2013. It most certainly is the largest in the Carolinas and the world's 23rd most active set of runways. Its municipal allegiance is being tested with an effort that began last year by the North Carolina General Assembly that would wrest direct control of the airport from the city of Charlotte. The final ruling is still pending. One of the casualties during this recent debate, and contentious debate, I might say, was longtime airport boss Jerry Ord. Joining us now, Charlotte Douglas International Airport Interim Aviation Director Brent Cagle. Brent, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. Brent, it's been splashed all over the paper, certainly in Charlotte, but it was fairly well-read news about Charlotte Douglas Airport going from city authority to possibly something else, a separate authority. North Carolina General Assembly wanted to do that. Not asking you if you think it's good or bad, but I would like to know, what is the genesis of this contentious nature? Why would the airport come up in this kind of question? But the other thing, and really more importantly, is this distracting to try to run what is clearly one of the biggest economic development generators?
Well, I guess I can only speculate on the reasons with the State General Assembly bringing it up. I think it was to help protect the airport. Clearly, it is distracting. Right now, the commission is legally barred from governance. Mm-hmm. It is in court. The state and the city are in court trying to resolve this. I hope that there will be a compromise position. I can tell you over the last 2 years, over the last 9 months as the aviation director and 2 years with Charlotte Airport, I've been very pleased with the cooperation and collaboration that I have with the city of Charlotte. And obviously, I think that their guidance and our role as a city department over the last 80 years has shown results. That being said, I do think we need to resolve this issue, and I hope that it can be resolved through some kind of compromise, not via the courts.
So when does this limbo status of the authority around Charlotte Douglas Airport, when does it become punitive to the operation of the airport and the further development?
Well, we work very hard every day to ensure smooth operations. We are always in contact with our business partners, all of the airlines. And so from one standpoint, it doesn't become punitive because we work very hard to execute flawlessly for our passengers and our business partners every day. We have over 100,000 people come through the terminal every day. And it's our goal to make sure every one of them has a great experience. We also service 7 airlines that operate out of Charlotte Douglas, and we work very hard to protect their investment in the airport and in the community. So in one way, operationally, we work hard to make sure it doesn't have an impact. On the other side, it clearly does have an impact with how we manage. With the amount of scrutiny that's placed on every decision made by myself or from the management team. And it is distracting from that standpoint, and I think it will be in the airport's best interest and the region's best interest to protect the asset by finding a compromise and ending this battle.
Laura, question?
I guess my question to you would be, as the airport continues to develop and grow, particularly with your intermodal facility, how do you see, or what advice would you give to South Carolina that would help to direct that traffic to the Port of Charleston? And we've been having a lot of debates in South Carolina about our infrastructure and how to spend the funding and what directions to move on. And obviously we know our port is very important, as the airport is. What would your advice be?
I think what I would say is we view it as a priority to develop partnerships with the state of South Carolina. We do think that the primary port, or ports, if you will, for the Norfolk Southern Intermodal Yard at the airport will be primarily Charleston and possibly Savannah. They're the closest deep water ports. I think it will primarily be Charleston. And the airport needs to work closely with South Carolina and others in the region to help develop that and foster more economic development around the asset.
Scott, let me just do a quick follow-up. So how critical, not to get in the minds of the Norfolk and Southern executives, but when you were going through the planning process of the intermodal and Norfolk and Southern was looking at the viability of making that decision, how much did the proximity and to the willingness of the South Carolina Ports Authority, and specifically Charleston, play into their decision to locate?
Well, I think the location is ideal. It is in what they call the Crescent Corridor. There are several interconnected intermodal yards throughout the southeast and the northeast. They have thought about this. They've thought about where they want to develop and how they want to develop, and now I think it's our responsibility to partner with the region, with South Carolina, to help promote further development around their business.
Thanks, Scott. Go ahead, please.
Well, first off, I'd like to say you mentioned that the airport is one of the most important economic development assets. I would say that it is by far the most important. There's not a client that goes through our office that doesn't have some reason to be involved with the Charlotte airport, so I want to state that. The intermodal facility is, I think most people, it's a marriage of convenience between Norfolk Southern and the airport. I don't think that most people understand that. What types of users do you see coming to the intermodal, and where can we develop further synergies?
Well, I think there is a bit of a misperception in that most of the goods moving out of the intermodal yard are not ending up on airplanes. This is not cargo coming from the train to a plane. It's really train to truck cargo. It is really the primary focus. And the intermodal yard's placement is ideal for that because it's right off of 485 and then accessible to I-85 and 77. That makes it ideal. It is a very convenient location. It also gave Norfolk Southern the ability to double their capacity. Their prior site in the city of Charlotte was small. This doubles their ability, and they have options on property to double their capacity again as they continue to grow. This provides them a good long-term home, and I think that we will see a lot of complementary businesses interested in locating near the intermodal yard.
So what's the attraction to the airport then? Brent, I'd wonder if you're not enplaning or deplaning cargo, then you've almost turned into a logistics manager of transport, of big items, of small items. So what does the airport want to do with this?
Well, you just nailed it. One thing that we think would be a very good complementary business are those kinds of logistics manager firms, the Amazons of the world, where they're in the distribution business, and they may need to distribute goods via air, via train, via truck. It's all right there at the airport. Now, I will say the intermodal yard, what made it attractive to Norfolk Southern is it's right off the main line, the Norfolk Southern main line, and it's property that had very low utility for other uses, but is ideally suited to their use. It's flat, they don't have a lot of vertical structures, which is important for the airport. We can't have vertical structures. So it really is ideally suited for that use.
Laura?
I guess one question I would have to you is, how soon are the plans going to be finished for the parking deck? And how is that impacted? How has that impacted the traffic and the travel through the airport? I know down in South Carolina, there's a lot of conversation and a seizure of opportunity from the Columbia Airport to say you don't have to worry about parking if you fly from here, because it's a huge convenience for direct flights out of Charlotte just to be able to drive up. But the change in the structure and the ease of function there has been talk of quite a lot of business engagements.
Well, you know, it's a challenge when it's always a challenge at an airport to manage construction projects while you're open for business, and that's the reality. You know, those 100,000 people come every day, regardless of what we have going on construction-wise. So we have to manage around it, and we know that the new parking deck, the hourly parking facility right outside the terminal, has been challenging to manage for our roadways. The good news is that project will be complete and open for the public use in November of this year, ahead of Thanksgiving. And then the rental car companies will relocate to that same facility later on in the spring of 2015. They'll move in and start to do final fit and finish for a rental car ready return facility and be able to move in probably within the next 5 or 6 months. All of that coming together will be hugely convenient for the passengers. It also means that passengers wanting to rent a car will no longer have to ride a bus. They will go straight out of the terminal and straight into the rental car facility right across the street. And likewise when they're returning cars. So it has been a challenge. We've all felt the pain. I know I have and my staff has, of growing through this, but the end is near, and it's going to offer a wonderful amenity for our passengers.
Have you felt any impact in your revenues and in your travel capacity?
No, you know, last year was a record year in our employments. We were up 5.4% at about 43.5 million passengers. Again, that's the highest passenger count we've had. This year we've seen passenger growth month over month, you know, year to date, in the plus 5% range. And so we haven't seen, I guess, a slowing of the growth, which is exciting and challenging all at the same time.
Yeah. Scott?
I think for those that might not be interested in locating either in Catawba County or in South Carolina, what other opportunities are there around the airport? I've read about some availability, but there's some big acreage out there.
Yeah, the airport, we hold about 5,000 acres. Not all of it is developable, but certainly a large percentage of it is. And we are looking to develop a strategic plan for how we can start to find compatible use. You know, the key to airport development or development around an airport is compatible use and looking at the proper mix of zoning and land uses. Clearly, off the end of the runway is not where we want residential. That's ideally suited to commercial, light industrial. But there are opportunities between the airport and the Catawba River, the Dixie-Berry Hill, the Steel Creek area, where mixed use residential may be appropriate. And as that develops, the airport wants to be a partner with the local governments and with the private developers so that we can ensure compatible use, so that we can ensure we're a good neighbor.
We have about 30 seconds left. You're the interim aviation director. Do you want the job? You want the permanent position?
Absolutely, yes.
When would they make a decision on that?
You know, I can't answer that. I hope soon.
Would it be based on whatever direction the authority would go in, or could they make a decision before the authority is settled?
Well, I would hope that as a compromise moves forward, they would be able to make a decision. And certainly, if I'm asked, I will say yes. I love airports, and I love being the Charlotte director.
Thank you, Brent. Please come back to the program. Good to have you here. Scott, nice to see you. Thank you. Good to see you, Laura. Thank you. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.